Welcome back. Well, Obama's election was seen as a huge step forward in the fight for equality, but some African Americans claim his victory could undermine the civil rights movement. After the Civil War, the US Congress outlawed slavery and granted citizenship to African Americans, but blacks were prevented from voting and suffered racial segregation in the use of public facilities and government services. In 1955, Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat to a white passenger. Her arrest led to the rise of the modern civil rights movement. Martin Luther King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech was followed by sweeping civil rights legislation. And in 1965, the Voting Rights Act banned the voter tests, which had disenfranchised most black people. Well, we're still joined by our guests now in New York, Manning Marable, in Washington, D.C., Alan Lichtman, and also in Washington, Hilary Shelton. Welcome back to all three of you, gentlemen. Manning, let me start with you first. What credence did you give to this idea that Obama's election actually undermines a lot of the issues that civil rights campaigners are still fighting for, because it takes away some of their impetus?
No, I disagree with that vigorously. I think that the election of Obama represents a fundamental change in the political universe of the United States. The fact that an African American can be the chief executive of this country, given the fact that 50 years ago, millions of black people were not able to exercise their constitutional rights in voting.
But politically, they had Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice.
Struggle.
Well, why do they feel disenfranchised before? I mean, they had Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice as role models.
I understand that the face of American power abroad under the Bush administration, unfortunately, has frequently been a person of color. So that simply the fact of African descent doesn't mean that the public policies that emanate from an administration will be enlightened or will reach out to the rest of the world's people in a progressive manner. But the main point I am attempting to make is that in the United States, there is a demographic transformation that's occurring, that nearly a third of the electorate is black and brown in the United States. Over the next 25 years, 1/2 of the country's electorate is going to become black, Hispanic, and Asian. So we're in a period of ethnic transition in our political system. And that's one of the reasons that's driving racial anxiety. That is, that Obama's victory, or someone like him, was inevitable given America's racial demographics. And increasingly, there are African Americans and Latinos and other people of color who are emerging as political leadership of the nation. And so America itself is redefining its own priorities. And that, in the long run, benefits all civil rights organizations who struggle for racial justice.
Alan, we were touching on earlier about the inequalities that Obama is going to have to tackle that still exist for blacks, for Hispanics, for Asians, economic inequality, educational inequality, I mean, health issues. There are a lot of issues that are going to have to be got to grips with here.
There are huge issues, even political representation. We have Barack Obama, an African-American president, but you know how many African-American senators we had out of 100? One, Barack Obama, and unless he's replaced by an African-American, we're going to have none. There's one or two, there's African-American and other ethnic minority governors. There's still a long way to go even for political representation, as well as these many, many other issues. Now, Obama's going to have a big choice to make, and this is critical. He could follow the Franklin Roosevelt model and say, my economic program is going to be what improves the status of African Americans. By adopting universal health care or some semblance of that, by improving the economy, I am going to improve the lot of African Americans, but I am not going to have programs that specifically target racial minorities. Franklin Roosevelt had no civil rights program whatsoever, in part because he had to cater to Southern white Democrats. But this will be interesting. Will Barack Obama kind of fold in his civil rights program within his broader economic program, or will he directly tackle these still enormous issues of racial disparities and racial racial discrimination that exists in America? That's going to be one of the most telling questions of his administration. That
is going to be really fascinating to watch, Hillary, because I guess this is a double-edged sword. I mean, if he goes out of his way to make things, you know, much better for black Americans at the expense of other groups, he lays himself open to accusations of discrimination himself.
Well, there's some issues that are simply common denominators. If we talk about things like making sure that all Americans, even the poorest, have an opportunity to get a high-quality education, that will include African Americans and poor whites and others that have been locked out of the system. If we talk about making sure we have programs to lift everyone up, to make sure anyone that wants to own a home can own a home in a sustainable way, one of the most important investments you can make in our country, then certainly African Americans will be lifted up as well. But also it's important to recognize that one size does not fit all in our country. We're a very diverse country, so we have to recognize that African Americans may be starting at a different point and need a different level of assistance. Hispanics may be starting at a different point, need a different level of assistance. That poor whites in Appalachia are starting at a different point and need a different type of assistance as well. So it'll be very important that race is a major factor is considered, because race still matters, even according to a very conservative Supreme Court in our country. But indeed, these economic issues do cut across many different lines in many different ways. But if it's not applied in a racially representative way, that is, we don't see that sometimes people are prevented from getting a loan because of race. Sometimes people are prevented from going to a good college or university because of race still in our country, then indeed you won't be able to seriously fix the problem.
Manning didn't agree with this,
right.
Hillary, but I wanted to ask you whether you thought there was a danger that genuine concerns may be given less priority by the population at large because of Obama's victory.
Well, I believe that the larger America will be able to hear and understand if Mr. Obama uses his bully pulpit in a way that we've seen quite evident through this campaign, in a way that he can speak to many different audiences in the United States and help us each understand the challenges and very particular situations that each individual group finds itself in.
OK, we're coming to the last couple of minutes. I want to ask each of you, we all agree that Obama's win doesn't magically make racism go away, but where do you see race issues in the next 10 to 20 years? Alan, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think number one, the issue of representation. Despite Obama, as I pointed out, at the next level, racial representation is very weak. Two, income and wealth inequality is enormous between minority and white America. That's a critical area. Three, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of disparities in how whites and minorities are treated by police officials, other law enforcement officials, sentencing, and incarceration. And finally, affirmative action.
OK. Manning, what do you say?
I want to emphasize what Alan just said. The criminal justice issue. Throughout the campaign, Barack Obama said very little about racial disparities in the criminal justice system. We need to just roll back everything that's happened since the Clinton administration in terms of getting rid of educational programs inside of prisons. Those need to be put back. We need to restore voting rights to the millions of Americans, most of whom are black or low income, who have lost the right to vote, either permanently or temporarily, in the United States because of a felony conviction.
So I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Manning. Very, very quickly, Hillary, the last 10 seconds, 10 to 20 years' time, where do you see race issues?
I see us continuing to move ahead. We've done a great job at this point of addressing issues. There's still so many problems ahead of us. If we continue to recognize the diversity of our country, the challenges, whether it's the criminal justice system, everything they said about that is right, whether our education system, health care, housing, access to capital, small business development, employment, all those issues are very important factors. We need to measure those as we move throughout the process to see if indeed there is any advancement. And indeed, I believe we can have that if we continue very specifically and very deliberately to address these concerns.
Gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for your time. Alan Lichtman, Manning Marable and Hillary Shelton, thank you. And thank you for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. Until next time, bye-bye.